Hello and welcome to the podcast Sensory Success Stories, a podcast by the European Sensory Network, ESN. In it we will talk about recent trends, challenging questions and surprising results in the area of sensory and consumer science. I'm your host, Fabienne Hübener. Today I'm very happy to present our first guest, Garmt Dijksterhuis. I'm sure I pronounced it wrong, but I gave it my best. And we will talk about the 8 major challenges for the science of food-related behavior and perception. Hello, Garmt. Very happy to have you here. Please, could you introduce yourself to the listeners who don't know who you are?
All right, I can do that. Garmt Dijksterhuis is my name. I always say to foreigners, don't try to pronounce it because you may hurt your tongue. Only Dutch people can say that. Yeah, I'm a psychologist by training, experimental psychologist and experimental psychological methodology. I always worked in the food-related perception field, which includes food behavior, food choice, and in particular sensory science, sensory analysis, and some statistical stuff around that. And I've worked in industry, in research institutes, universities, and currently I'm teaching experimental psychology at the University of Utrecht, at the very same group that I graduated from in 1987.
Okay, so you span a circle.
Yeah.
Okay, you were so kind to send me a draft for a publication that you're working on right now. And I think this will be a good starting point to talk about in this podcast. And the title of the draft is 8 easy, in quotes, I guess, pieces, challenges for the science of food-related behavior and perception. What made you start thinking and writing about this topic?
Yeah, I think it started maybe even over 1.5 years ago already, when I was involved in writing some grant proposal, and I thought of, well, what are the areas that I think we should study more in light of getting a grant for research. So I wrote down these areas. The text ended up never being used for the grant submission, but then I thought, well, this is a good list of topics. And then I was invited to give a talk at Wageningen University with my then colleagues, and I just presented these eight topics, and I expanded them a little bit, and I started writing them up and writing them up again, and trying to make them into a concise article, and have been doing so for the last year, and still isn't finished. But that was the origin of it. So eight areas that I think we would benefit by having more research in these areas, if you talk about health and sustainability in the food area.
Mm-hmm. And in the draft, you really emphasize theory. How come scientists in the field of food-related behavior and perception and sensory science seem not to dedicate a lot of time to a theoretical framework?
Sometimes, yes, I have the idea. I always make the distinction between sensory science and sensory analysis. Sensory science is the science behind sensory perception. That can be very broad, from marketing to neuroscience and what have you. But sensory analysis is the application of some of the knowledge in a sensory lab as we know it as sensory scientists. And that is a rather practical field. Nothing wrong with practical fields, of course. You need to do good measurements. But in order to be ready for the future and face all the challenges that we have, like health problems and sustainability problems, we may want to have new measurements, new ideas. And there are a lot of new ideas around. But very often I think that the ideas are based on collecting data. And I always say, how do you know what type of data to collect if you do not have a theory about what type of data is connected to what type of thing you're measuring? So that's why I keep stressing on maybe we need more theory about food-related perception and food behavior. Food is also very different from other stimuli. Food is, if you stop eating, it's end of story. You need food. You put it inside yourself. So it's always a very special stimulus. So, not all other theories from other products apply to food, and sometimes they are used in the area. So that's why I always say let's think about, let's take a step back and think about theory. And then you know how to connect theory to measurement, and then maybe you could do new measurements to find out new things.
And what are the answers of some of your colleagues when you point out this lack of theory, especially maybe when they work in agencies or do very practical work? I could imagine they say, "Oh, we don't have time for this. This is really time consuming."
That may be a problem indeed, because it is part of the field is really practical. There is no time for that, and in particular in agencies in a commercial context, you do not have time to think of theory. Some of the agencies do, but I feel that there may be a lack of proper academic theory building in this area. It's not because people do not agree that you need theory, but it just doesn't seem to be happening. There are areas where it happens a bit. Of course, signal detection and Estonian modeling, rather technical area, has been developed a lot, and that's good theory for doing psychophysical measurements. But there are still a lot of things that are, well, a little bit weak on theory. And in particular, when you talk about a perception of smell, of course. Smell is such a different thing from vision. And so you cannot put all the ideas from other senses onto smell perception. So there you need maybe new theory.
I think you mentioned this problem of rubbish in, rubbish out with data analysis. And a theory would actually lead to better experimental designs, better analysis, lower cost of studies.
Yeah, exactly. I think so. You can do better measurement. And sometimes, maybe not cheaper designs, maybe more expensive designs, which is a problem. Good measurements cost money. And then it's easy to do a simple test that you know it's cheap and fast. But it may not give you what you need. It may only give you what you think you might need. And then you are lost.
So I would like to get to the first point you would like to address, also in terms of theory building. And you say that we do not know enough about how to bridge the intention to behavior gap. Maybe you could shortly describe what that is, the intention to behavior gap?
Yes, it's a well-known a gap in research on behavior. People may when you ask a consumer something, the consumers may tell you, "I have the intention to do this or to do that," and that's well-established research methodology. Just ask them what they find. Like would you buy this product if it would cost that much? Willingness to pay, sort of thing. That's an intention type thing. But then when you look when you're going to look what they actually going to do, they do not do that. They may tell you they intend to, but it's completely different to have a real behavior, because at the point of behavior, there are a lot of things. The situation is different from where you were in when you uttered the intention. A lot of other things may have happened in between. So an intention is often a thing made up on the spot, upon being prompted to make an intent, to utter an intention. But behavior is completely different. So there is very often a gap between the two, because and behavior is just is an act based on the situation and your state of your body. And an intention is just something you made up on the spot when asked, unrelated from the situation you are in when you behave. So intention is a bad measurement for behavior, I always say. Willingness to pay studies, I regard not very high in validity.
And also in terms of sustainability and health, to have ideas or start with a theory about how to bridge this gap would be very important. I mean, there are so many examples. Let's take the example of I would like to eat less meat for my health and for the environment, but it's very, very hard to do. Most people don't follow up on their intention. And when somebody in the field of food-related behavior, sensory science would like to delve deeper into that topic, what would you recommend? Where should they start? What kind of research or theoretical research should they do?
Yeah, I would always say to really think about the research methods that you use. Because, as I said, many methods which I'm critical about concerning validity of measurement, like focus groups and interviewing consumers and the like, that is probably the cause of the intention-behaviour gap, because then you get all types of answers from consumers, and then you probably see that they're very much unrelated to their actual behaviour. So if you're going to do research on food-related behaviour, really think deep about what type of measurement you do. Preferably, you just look at what behaviour people show, or you build a very clever experimental design in which people have to do things or choose things or whatever. But just asking them and relying and taking their answer as gospel is often a very bad way of measurement.
I remember an example that Eb Koester gave where he asked people in a cafeteria, maybe it was at Wageningen University, what kind of bread did you eat today? And they said, yeah, sure, we ate whole grain bread. But he could look at the cafeteria, what they had sold that day, and that didn't match what people
Yeah,
actually said they did.
exactly. Exactly. And of course, I graduated with Eb and I worked with Eb Koester. So I am from that school, indeed. Yes. He always pointed out these sort of fallacies in research. Yeah.
And so when somebody would give you a big grant, you said you wrote these points
Yeah.
while thinking about getting a grant. So you get $1 million from the European Union to do research on that topic. What would you spend the money on?
Oh, that is a very difficult question. I think I will spend the money, well, a little bit, just a tiny fraction of it, on really thinking on what it is we need and getting together with some of the colleagues in the field first. And to really narrow down the list of many problems that we have to maybe 2 or 3, and go into deep with that. But I would first really go in the literature and talk to all the great thinkers in our area to find out what we really need, and then set up the study to do. Of course, usually you do that before you write the grant, but in this case, I would also need use a little bit of that around to really find out what we need. Yeah. And that would probably boil down to understanding food-related behavior as a special type of behavior, not just as any behavior. And that part of it would probably be methodological, like how do we measure things, not just neuroscience, because it's not true that all the answers are in the brain, so I'm critical about that. But I would focus on behavioral studies.
Do you, just to try to pinpoint you down, do you have any specific study in mind?
Actually, no. If you talk about food, you're also talking about smell perception. And smell is a very interesting sensory modality, which seems to be escaping us in really not really understanding how it works, both at the physiological level, receptor level, but also behavioral. So I would not mind putting this grant also into smell research.
I like that. I used to be a smell researcher. I did my PhD in olfaction, so I totally agree. I'd like to hear that.
I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.
And the other thing that you said, which I also think is sometimes really underestimated, is the time and effort it takes to just read and think. Sometimes I have the feeling, let's start a project. The idea is great. And then nobody finds the time, because also it costs money. I mean, it's the time that you need maybe at the university to teach or at an agency to do the projects. And actually, one should be allowed in a grant to write, I need that kind of money to set up a virtual room or a real meeting where we just can sit together, read, tell each other what we should read, what we did read, and the way we can go ahead thinking in terms of theory.
That is true. There is also so much material published, some good, some not so good, and people like me get several requests for reviewing every week. So there's much more written than we can ever read. And when you get review requests, you do not know if it's going to be a good read or not. I turn down most of the requests because I cannot do reviewing for 100% of the time. These times to think, they do happen. 2 weeks ago, I was invited for a special Lawrence workshop. It's called in the Netherlands, where they gather a very wide range of disciplines, from museum scientists to linguists to me, to computational linguists to historians. And it was all about smell as a cultural phenomenon. Historians were there, I mean, and art historians, and they focus on smell in its broader, as a cultural phenomenon in its broader sense. So, and we took 4 or 5 days just to think about that and to discuss and to have presentations. So it does happen, but you need the ground to do it. You need people to get there, and you need people to free their agenda, to free their time to go there, sit for a few days, and think. Something good will come out of that.
Yep.
Writing a white paper, things like that.
I need to do some advertising here. That's what we do at our European Sensory Network meetings. So I mean, these meetings are important, you know.
I visited several. Yes, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next point. This is a second area you list that could use more theory, and this is automatic and habitual behavior.
Oh,
Why do we need to understand this behavior better? Or maybe first give an example for this kind of behavior?
I always give the example that when I go fill up my car with gasoline, I come out of this gas station with a bar of chocolate. I also fill up the car, but I also fill up myself with chocolate.
Yeah.
And it's almost automatically. When I go fill up the car, I'll buy chocolate. It's not healthy, but it just happens. So this has become, in some way or another, it has become a habit. And then the situation triggers that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's the situation of the gas station and everything, maybe the smell of petrol, whatever, that triggers the almost automatic behavior in me to buy a piece of chocolate. How these habits are formed, I'm not sure if we know that. I'm talking about the food area, of course, so we can study that in more detail, I would say. They are difficult to change. Once they are there, they seem to be there to stay. It's very hard to kick a habit. It's not an addiction. I cannot live without chocolate. People cannot live without food, but I would not call that an addiction. It's different. But then again, maybe it's related. So people look into that. I know that that's an area of research. But from a practical point of view of food choice, a sustainable food choice, changing habits and building habits, that's one of the other points in my list of 8. At an early age, that's where habits get built, where you learn to connect situations to food. So habit formation, habit change is an important topic, and we could use some more research there.
Mm-hmm. I have the feeling there's actually a lot of research being done, maybe not so much in the area of food. I know there's a podcast by Katie Milkman and a book about by her, and she is a researcher into how to change habits.
I saw that link. I don't know all of research, but I saw that link that you sent about Katie Milkman,
Mm-hmm.
and had the impression that one of the ideas was to make sure that the wished behavior is rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
Well, food is always rewarding. Bad food is rewarding in itself already.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the total solution there.
Okay, so maybe in the food area we need actually a different approach to this habit changing. And you just mentioned that you buy chocolate when you go to a gasoline station. The same with me when I go to how do you call it, Baumarkt, when I need to buy appliances or stuff like that. I also always pick up the same piece of chocolate. I can see that in my bills. It's really it's 100% habit. And sometimes I think, why should I try to change my ways? Why can't the shop just put away the chocolates from the cashier? I mean, I always feel that we, especially in the area of food, have to rely on our own change. And what is about change that is introduced by the government, by society, by the producers?
Yeah, I agree. It could be an interesting idea that a Baumarkt would only be allowed to sell appliances and woods and paint and things like that, and not candies.
Yeah. Maybe then you could do research if the rate of overweight and obesity goes down in the area around the Baumarkt. I don't know the name in English.
Do it DIY, do it yourself shop.
Okay.
I think that's the thing. Yeah,
And you just also mentioned a topic that is the third area where you recommend
yeah,
more theoretical research is eating education at an early age. I have the feeling there's a lot
yeah,
of studies right now coming out, especially from Edulia, especially from Scandinavian
yeah,
countries.
cool.
And
Yeah,
why is
yeah,
food habit formation at an early age so important?
yeah. Yeah, now let me first say I'm not keeping track of all these studies that
Hmm.
come out. I know the Edulia project a little bit because one of my former colleagues is involved.
Hmm.
Um, yes, there is a lot of research there. Um, the problem that I understand from some of my former colleagues in Wageningen on the school, primary school curricula is that there is no time. They have a full program, and there's no time to add anything, even food related stuff, or a little bit more time for lunch or whatever, because it is possible to have the kids eat healthy. I mean, I think they've shown that it is, and maybe not even a big problem. The big problem may be resistance by parents. The big no time to in the program to change anything. And then sometimes I heard, I'm not sure what's the situation now in all countries, but in the Netherlands sometimes I heard that almost every week there's a new rule or a new thing for teachers to
Yeah,
implement.
yeah, they are
So
sick
they're getting sick of
of
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So it may be more administratively regulatory than actually getting kids to eat healthy. That may just be very well possible.
But that leads to the fourth area that you mentioned that needs more research, and that is communication and information, especially
Yeah.
about food choice, and what should be done in this area.
Well, I do not have all the answers just like
I know
that.
it's a draft that makes it so interesting. So maybe other people, our
Yes.
listeners, can join in the discussion.
What I think with communication and information is, I think it's twofold. One is that formal governmental information about health and food is scattered over several agencies. They may even sometimes contradict each other. So the government does not seem to speak with one voice. That's unfortunate. And the other thing is that every idiot can put something on the internet,
Hmm. Hmm.
especially about food, and a lot of idiots do that. And everybody reads that, they may believe it. I mean, people are very much afraid for MSG. Seem to be a hoax, seem to be nothing. It's useless, it's nonsense. But still, people are afraid. And everybody can put it there. But if you are a food producer and you say something about your food, you're scrutinized to death,
Hmm.
which should be, of course, the case. But because you cannot always trust the industry with all the information. But it did seem to be a little bit a lopsided thing that you can put anything about food on the internet, and then when you are an official agency, you cannot claim anything about your food. I don't have an answer for that,
Yeah.
other than perhaps because the thing is that the public believes all this nonsense. So maybe you can get back to education, have better education programs, so people are more critical about what they see and what they hear, and not just believe anything that they're told. But that's a long shot.
The number five on your list of things that need more theory and research is something I know is very dear to your heart, and that it's valid consumer food choice research
Yeah.
methodology. So, why is this so important?
Yeah, we already alluded a little bit to this. I'm from the school of Epcuster, of course, and he was always very critical about a lot of measurements. Well, valid measurements. That just to be very brief, a valid measurement measures what you want to measure. If you want to measure a temperature, you use a thermometer and not a slide ruler, things like that. Um, so in the consumer science is different. It's difficult. It's a different area, and it's very difficult because we do not have standards. We do not have an agreement on what is a volt or an ampere or what is a centimeter.
Mm.
We do not have that. We develop psychological scales. We develop other measures. We have psychophysics. We have line scales to measure perceived intensity. And that seems to be working quite all right, but it's not as hard, as strict as as a volt or an ampere or a centimeter. So the measurement instrument already is always on a discussion, always under scrutiny, and it should be, of course. And that makes it difficult to have hard predictions, to have good measurements. And it makes it also very different to compare different studies, because different studies on the same thing may use a slightly different measurement instrument. And even when it's formally the same measurement instruments, when it's used under different circumstances, different groups, different instructions to the group that fill out scales or whatever, you may be doing a different measurement. So the methodological part is tricky in the psychological and behavioral sciences.
Mm-hmm. And one gets a feeling that there's a trend for using methodology that is quicker and quicker because it's cheaper and cheaper. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's very bad. um, it I've always been critical on consumer focus groups, because consumers, they tell a story and that they just believe their own story, but it's unrelated to what they really may do in a behavioral choice situation. I've always been critical about asking consumers things. As Eb Kuster always said, if you ask a consumer a question, the problem is they give you an answer. Even nonsensical questions, they will answer for you. So you have to go beyond that. You have to devise special situations and experiments, or observe behavior, or have other sort of measurements. But the thing is, there is a lot of vested interest in these quick and dirty and cheap and fast methods. It's so much cheaper to have some consumer interviews or whatever than devise a proper and a rigid psychological experiment. And a lot of agencies selling these tools, these consumer interview tools and everything, or just send out another questionnaire with a lot of questions that sometimes are nonsensical but will be answered nevertheless. So that's a problem. I'm always very strict on methodology and asking questions or setting up a study.
Mm-hmm. But I would assume actually that industry companies, producers, and agencies would be very interested in good methodology to have an outcome that helps maybe the product to do well on the
Not
market. And
automatically.
as everybody knows, most new products fail. So this could be
Yeah,
a game
exactly.
changer when one really thinks about methodology.
I'm not sure if that's always true. It's true, 60 to 70, maybe sometimes 80% of new products, food products in the market do fail within 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I did write a paper on that and how I think that comes about. Sometimes industries and agencies, they have to or want to do research, just to do research, to show that they did some research. Mm-hmm. And that irrespective of the value of the research, they can just tell, okay, we did research, so we put out the product. And just to tick a box. And the outcome of the research is not that important, because they ticked the box, they did some research, and they launched the product. That happens. So it's not automatically true that they are always interested in good research. And the other movement that I think I see is some of the bigger companies, maybe smaller too, but I know some of the bigger, they have de-invested in doing scientific research themselves. So they stopped doing a lot of research. And I think that behind that decision may lie the idea that, well, we rather put our money in marketing than in research, and sell the stuff anyway if we put millions into marketing. That may be more efficient than put the money into research. Mm-hmm. That's a choice. Mm-hmm. And they may have found out that people do indeed buy the products by marketing, so they can skip the research, just put out any product that seems reasonable, mm-hmm. and have marketing, just advertisement solve the selling problem.
Yeah. So do you think that a better foundation or more valid research methodology could enhance the chance that a product becomes a success on the market? Or do you think that is sort of this 80% is a number that I hear since decades, and that nothing will change ever? Maybe only with marketing, but not with scientific research.
I think of course you can do better. I mean, that's no doubt. If you do more valid research, You may find out that some products will fail, but it's timely and it's costly. Maybe it's just cheaper to put it out on the market and see what happens. I mean, I doubt it because it may cost millions to really get a product out on the test market. But test markets do exist, so it's a difficult thing. And of course, there's a difference between doing research, like sensory research on a product when you change ingredients or production technology. That is some sort of a quality control. I think you can do that very, very well with standard research. But finding new products, that's different. That's a different animal. First, finding out what products will be bought and how to innovate. And now, of course, we know that plant-based is a big thing. So a lot of effort is going into making plant-based products, making them either look like meat or just delicious in themselves. I think that's an important movement from sustainability and health point of view. A lot of effort is going into that direction, and there is a chance that it's still a small market, but I think if they put their money into good, proper, valid research in sensory and consumer science, there is a good chance that a lot of these plant-based products will indeed be bought because they're delicious in themselves. So we seem to be in an era that there are some changes going on.
So let's move on to the sixth area. And in it, you address it is important to understand consumers of a lower social economic position.
Sometimes research is being done on, let's say, the self-thinking kitchen or a refrigerator that knows when you're out of milk automatically and orders it. That's fine for me and for you, but it's not fine for all those millions of people who cannot even pay for such a fancy kitchen. I mean, so that's research which is a waste of money, because if you want to change to sustainability and to health by food, you have to reach the millions. And the millions may not be interested in food anyway. They may be worrying to have food, to have it. It is a changing a bit. I see some projects into that area starting, and there are some people looking into that. But those millions that are poor, maybe a little bit depressed, maybe not always of superior health, but then again, maybe they are not depressed and happy and healthy, but poor. That's a different sort of people than most of the researchers are. So it's very difficult to think about ways of addressing those people. They're also hard to reach very often. Communication may not reach them. It is. I don't know a lot about these areas.
Yeah.
It is specialization in themselves, but it's important if you want to reach, because you have to reach the millions if you want to change the health and the sustainability situation of everybody, of the world.
I think it's also a big problem to reach these people, and sometimes I get the
Yeah.
feeling a lot of research in the field of sensory science or food-related behavior is done with students of psychology, so they are
Oh
weird
yeah.
people,
Yeah.
Western educated,
Yeah.
industrialized, rich, democratic,
I think,
and so
yeah.
it would be
Exactly.
important to do more research with non-weird people.
Yes, I always say we're doing another study for the rich white men. Or students,
Okay,
yes,
good,
it's
big
true.
big
There is
topic, but
a,
I have seen it being
yeah,
addressed on the
yeah,
conferences in the last years. But sometimes I have the feeling that there's a lot of talking, but not so much action and research.
there's an interesting book by Eldar Shafir. It's called Scarcity. Maybe you heard of it.
No.
Why having too little means so much?
Hmm.
And he claims, I was shocked hearing that when I first saw him talk, that a lot of people in these poor areas, they are always a little bit depressed. So they have a different state of mind than you and me. For a lot of reasons, poverty is one such a thing. So you really have to find out how that works in those areas. How people's psychology works in relating to food and sustainability. Yeah.
Good. Back to
Yeah.
the weird people. Topic number 7
Right.
is you emphasize we should do research into the accepting of new food technology and new
Yeah.
food products. I mean, you are also going to these conferences, and what I hear since many years is about cultured meat, proteins produced by bacteria, food 3D printing, and all kinds of really out stuff.
Yeah.
But I have the feeling it never enters the market. It's
It is.
seems like science fiction.
It is. Sometimes it's a toy for researchers. um, I have to. Sometimes I think that maybe it's very bad of me to think that. Yeah, it's true. It's in the end, it's acceptance of the material, that the food material that's produced, which makes for the technology being successful or not. So before you enter on big technology, I would also think to always include in such research programs a proper consumer acceptance study. And that means not just asking if they would buy cultured meat, because they may say, yes, we will. So everything comes together. You have to have valid research methods to find out if people really will buy it or accept it. You have not to ask only the rich white people, but ask everybody if you can. And then the thing is, okay, apply your technology to make new products. The cultured meat is such an example. I personally, I wouldn't object in eating cultured meat, but vegetarians may, because it's still meat. I mean, there's a lot of issues in this area, and of course, safety is an issue. But I trust my technical colleagues on making safe products. But then again, it's also how you can communicate about it. So communication is also part of that.
Sorry, have you ever eaten cultured meat? Probably not,
No,
or it's so expensive that
no,
hardly anybody one knows ever ate it.
no. And the weird, the scary thing is, in theory, you can have a cultured human burger.
Yeah. I'm so curious. I think I would try everything, but okay, maybe I have to cut that out. But
of course, insect-based products. That's also a discussion, and that's nothing wrong with that. But well, I think there's not much wrong with that. But it's also communication. If you're gonna put a big locust on every package, people will not buy it. That has been a mistake for years. Just hide it, and maybe you have to probably declare that it's in insect protein in the product, but do not make it prominent, because probably people will not like it for that reason. So there's a lot of things going wrong there.
Also, one issue that I see right now, because ultra-processed food is now a big topic, and I think that people who might be willing to try these new food items that are heavily processed, at one point will say, no, I want to go back to nature. I don't want to eat cultured meat or pasta that has been made out of insects. And I think that's also a difficult issue.
It is interesting, because ultra processing is not the problem. It's not the processing. It's the fact that there is a lot of salt and fat in many products that are also ultra processed.
Or the texture.
Yeah. I don't think the processing itself is a problem. I mean, and back to nature, I don't believe in that, because we are nature. Everything around us is nature, because we made it and we are nature. So back to nature is a meaningless concept to me. And there's a lot of very dangerous substances in nature. So I would rather not go back to nature, because it will kill you. You need to process some food. And then ultra-processed, everything you may think is natural is ultra-processed, and you trust it. You trust your car, it's ultra-processed. You trust your phone, but it's ultra-processed. But food, then again, of course, is a little bit different. You put it inside you, but still. So the ultra-processing discussion is difficult, because I don't think it's the processing.
I mean, still, I think the jury is still out, but it's a big discussion right now. And I like you mentioned this little story where a guy is sipping his zero sugar Coke and is driving his electric car. And but no, I want my food naturally.
And then back to nature. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's come on to the very last point, and is novel shopping behavior.
During the COVID pandemic, online shopping, of course, exploded in size. And I thought, well, after the pandemic, people will probably stick to doing a lot of online buying, and that seems to be true. And also online food buying is also growing. And there is a chance of doing a lot of research, online-based research, on online food buying. Now, I don't think it is being done a lot, but I think there's a lot of valuable data lying and waiting for us, like how people navigate through an online food environment, how fast they click, or how they move their mouse, or what pressure they exert when swiping, things like that. There's a lot of valuable psychological behavioral data that you can extract from online food buying, and you can probably nudge people in buying the healthy and sustainable thing in online food buying. So that is, I think, an interesting market for the future. Only thing, I do not hope that all the delivery is being done on fossil fuel, but that's a different
different issue. Yeah,
discussion.
but I saw there was one study that showed that we tend to buy more healthy products when we shop online. So this is actually good news. I mean, what you said, we could
Yeah,
do the nudging online. It's easier.
yeah,
Maybe it's not so
yeah.
impulse driven like when you go to a supermarket and at the end there's a chocolate waiting for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That there's not this chocolate in the end of the at the counter. The other thing, of course, is that there may be a selection bias because people doing the online shopping may be interested in food and or may be able to do the thing online anyway. And other people may not be able to do it, and they still go to the supermarket. But that's a methodological issue that can be solved. The risk is that the online shopping supermarket online markets will also put your chocolate when you go click pay. But I have to think about that. Maybe that should be forbidden or things like that.
We got all the points. Let me take a look at my
Right.
list. 8 points. So I assume some of our listeners there are young researchers who are still deciding in which field they want to do research. And many of them, I find that when I talk to young students, have health and sustainability on their mind. So they want to go
Yeah.
in that area, which I think is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
great. So which
Yeah.
of the 8 topics you listed would you consider especially urgent or promising?
Oh, that is a difficult one. Well, I think the one underlying all of them is the methodological one.
Okay.
Make sure that you do proper and valid measurements. So have some good find some background. I think maybe in behavioral science or psychological methodology to really understand how you measure how you do measurements on people, on consumers, on behavior, and from there go find your area, the area that you like or is close to your heart. But always try to do the proper and strict methodological choice.
Could you give me an example of a behavioral methodology that you like, that you would recommend using in an experiment?
Well, yeah, well that's the other paper. That's the other paper that we published on all these new methods and the validity issue. Well, one little thing that I also did to the student recently, and as always been an idea of by App Custer, is you can do any study, but after the study, you give people a choice of, for instance, 2 or 3 items, and you say it's a reward for the study, but secretly, it's part of the study.
Yeah.
So what we recently did is it was a study on plastic pollution, and do some VR measurements and everything. And then as a reward on the study, we said, okay, well, just pick a chocolate as a reward. We have chocolate from another study, and thank you, bye-bye. And we just kept track of did they pick the one that was plastic wrapped, or did they pick the one that was not wrapped? I think little things like that can tell you a lot.
Yeah.
And you can build that into a bigger study, of course.
Yeah, but I think
So
then you
it's
really
have
need
a
training in human behavior, in psychology or ethology, because we're not so different from primates. And
Yes, I think that's a good background. Yeah.
so my very last question: are you involved in a research study right now?
Well, currently I have a 100% teaching appointment, so I'm formally not doing research. But then again, I also have a lot of master students, and they of course do their research. So I do little research projects with the master students, as I just mentioned, with this chocolate reward thing. Another thing was change of change of olfactory preferences based on being a vegan or not, or changing your diet.
Oh,
That
interesting.
may change your olfactory preferences. I have some students doing perception work. Like one very interesting and weird topic is oral numerosity perception. That is, how many things can you estimate you have in your mouth, which is interesting to see if the counting in mouth fits the counting that we know takes place in vision or in haptic. So it's mainly teaching and then a little bit of research on the side with students.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my very last question. Is there any book or publication or podcast or whatever that you would recommend people to read to get new ideas in the area of food behavior?
I'm not saying you get new ideas from it, but I've written a book about food-related perception, and I'm working on the English translation. So that would be a book I would recommend.
Okay, so what will it be called in English?
I have a working title, but I have not I don't have an agreement of the publisher yet. But my working title is a taste of science of taste.
Love it.
Thank you.
As a journalist, I approve.
In Dutch, it's called Hoe smaakt het? And that would translate like how does it taste?
Thank you very much for this interesting interview,
Thank you.
Garmt, and I hope we see each other on one of the next conferences. Thank you for listening. This podcast was brought to you by the European Sensory Network in 2023. The intro music was by Shaggy Brown and is licensed under the Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License, and you can listen to more of his music on freemusicarchive.org.